All right, welcome again to the S.E.M podcast. Zach Hewlett is the host today. That's me. Jack's not here with us, but today we're joined by the other half of the Verdegems, Kevin. Kevin, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well, mate. Yeah, I'm good, great. You haven't lost it, I can tell. That's amazing.
I've nearly lost the Scottish lingo, no.
No, I mean, I'm sure you get to practice with President Watson periodically too, which is fun.
Every now and again, yes. I translated for him at our state conference recently,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, I've been simultaneously translating Dutch to English, and vice versa since I was about 16. And
Okay.
so in church, if you're ever good at anything, you get to keep doing it,
Right.
because they'll keep asking you to do it. Um, And so I was off in a separate room translating in a way that members who couldn't attend could follow through Zoom and,
Mhm.
all that stuff. And they had asked me, could you come to the front and translate for President Watson? And I went to the front and he's like, no, it'll be okay. I was like, well, I was going to translate for you to English. And he was like,
That's pretty fun.
yeah,
Well,
man.
good. Well, you know the podcast format. I'm sure you've listened to a few of these, maybe. Well, then you have some catching up to do.
I do. Sasha's been really praising them a lot. And yeah, I really need to.
but
So
you got a good starting point. I mean, you've got, I don't know, close to 70 episodes. I think that pick and choose everybody that you want to listen to. You can. There are some older missionaries than our generation and some younger missionaries as well that are in there, but pick and
when you
choose as you
when you
like.
say hour, when from what time to what time did you serve? What were your start and finishing dates?
I was January '05 to January '07. So, you know,
I was October '03 to
okay.
October '05. So I think I might be one of those older missionaries that you keep referring to.
No, no,
Um,
no. If I knew you on the mission, then you're not older missionary.
okay.
That's not how frame things. If it's someone beyond my time that I like to call them the legends of the S.E.M that I never met, but I heard their names. That's a different compartment. So,
Fair enough.
but let's start with you and talk about your decision to serve a mission, and then we'll go back and talk about your experience since being home, and then we'll go back through the mission. So I'll let you carry on.
I decided that I wanted to go on a mission pretty much when I was 8 years old. We had an elder serving in our then branch, who was huge. This guy must have been like 7 feet, just
Okay.
like, or 7 foot, tall, huge. And our branch president, who's this really short guy, comes and he talks to the primary, and he asks, he's like, "Who was the biggest missionary you ever knew?" And instead of going Jesus, we all went Elder. What's his face?
That's great.
Because you're in primary, that's what you do. You have no
Right.
frame of reference. Um, but it was then that I learned that you could go on a mission, and I made up my mind right there and then that I wanted to serve a mission. And even though they had been done away with, there used to be this thing in church called mini missions,
Hmm.
where you, as a young man, you were able to serve a mini mission and actually live and work with the missionaries for a while. And I had been nagging our mission president's ear for longer than he probably cared for. And
Hmm.
then at some point, there was a visa waiter, and so they needed someone to come in and fill that position. I was 16, 17 maybe, and I spent half of my summer holidays, which covers the months of July and August, and I spent the entire month of August up in the Netherlands working and teaching as missionaries do, as the song
Wow,
goes.
that's cool.
Um, Funny enough, I would tell that story to some of the other elders, and they were like, "And you still wanted to serve a mission after all that?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "What's wrong with you?" Um, and so I remember I sent in my papers, and it took forever for them to arrive. I mean, I remember Elder Zwick, 7-year, had come to our stake, and I got a chance to talk to him afterwards.
Mhm,
And he had asked me, "When are you going on a mission?" And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of holding off because I had to do 1 year high school over." Um, that's a completely different story. But
mhm.
I had told him I'm waiting for the end of the school year to make sure I passed so that I could submit my papers. And he went, "Boy, where's your faith?" And that kind of shook me to my core.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I submitted my papers, and I had written, I'm available to leave July 1st. I would have my final exams would be done. I would have collected my report card, my high school diploma, whatever. I would have
Mhm.
been ready to go. And then my papers got in there like, "Hey, you can leave October 5th." And I was like, "What? That's 3 months from now." Um, so I had to go and find like a summer job to make some more money to pay for my mission. But when the papers finally did come, I was so thrilled. Both my dad and I have always had a huge affinity with Scotland. Um, I gotta admit, I kind of cheated. In my mission papers,
Yeah.
I had written under like medical things, very sensitive to the sun. Scotland here again.
You did not? Seriously?
I totally
Oh my
did.
gosh.
I did. I like telling it that way, although at the time that wasn't my aim.
Mhm,
But I am extremely fair skinned. I remember I did also, as Sasha mentioned in the last podcast, I served in Dundee, it's a very sunny place, and we weren't allowed to wear hats. But I did have hair back then. I'm really bald now. I started losing it toward the end of my mission. Um,
mhm.
yeah, I was, and out of pure desperation, instead of hair gel, I would put sunblock in my hair and then comb it to protect my skull from getting sunburned.
Oh, I don't blame
So,
you.
yes,
Goodness.
people won't believe that story because they're like, "Man, Scotland, it's always raining." I was like, "Yeah, I know, I was there, but Dundee, super sunny. It's literally the sunniest place in all of Scotland." So,
Yeah, it's true.
but we'll get to Dundee in a minute. Remind me to tell you about seagulls.
Okay,
Um, just that's you won't want to miss those stories.
okay.
Um, and so I get to the airport. I went through the MTC. I had President Bodine as well. Sasha came out on her mission 3 months after I arrived, and left 3 months before I left. So she was slap dab in the middle of
Mhm.
my mission. Hmm? Because sisters obviously serve 6 months less than.
Yeah.
Were you able to pick that up?
I heard it. Oh
Yeah,
god. Thank
she's
you, Sasha.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Oh gosh.
you have no idea how many times the past 16 years I've had to hear that. Um,
It's great.
and
Oh
so
goodness.
I we came out with, I think, a group of 12 at the time in our MTC group that arrived in Scotland, which included Sister Amy Webb. I
Mhm.
don't know if you've had her on the podcast yet.
I haven't yet.
A lovely sister. Um, and obviously she went home 6 months before we all did. But by the time that we were in that bed and breakfast at the end of the mission, of our, I think, like 10 elders or something, we only had 3 of us left. Many of them had gone home early, either through medical reasons or family stuff had happened. Some of them, unfortunately, didn't get to go home that honorably,
Mhm.
for some things that had happened. But there was just a couple of us left. McAndrews was one of them.
Yeah.
Scott McAndrews, Scooter to his friends, and I
Scooter.
forget Scooter. Yeah, he goes by Scooter.
I've
Um,
never heard that nickname. That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And I'm trying to remember who the other elder was that was there at the end. Um, Man, I've always
Well,
been
I know that
I've always been
Elder
horrible with names.
I know Elder Hill and Elder Bredlow went home transfer early for
Mhm.
school stuff.
Yeah, those were, circumstantial things.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, uh,
Did you
life
have
happens.
Sprague or Anderson or Livingston?
Anderson was actually my MTC comp.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, we did not get along. Um, I was this know-it-all young whippersnapper, and he was this wizened 25-year-old at the time, and he would get really annoyed when we were practicing in the MTC, teaching, if I would interrupt him and add something to the thing, and he was like, "Don't do that." And so at some point we get this practice investigator, and it's not made clear whether it's an actual investigator or a member. I'm pretty sure there were members back then, but anyways. And so he chokes up and he looks over at me, and I'm like, dude, you told me not to say anything, so I'm just gonna keep my trap shut. And he blew up the the discussion.
Oh no.
I was like, you know better. I'm not gonna. I mean, after that, we never really served around each other. He's got a lovely business in California now,
Hmm.
working with wood. He's got this amazing like floating shelves business
Oh,
from
cool.
like really amazing wood. I mean I find that very admirable. But other than that, we've never been in touch since we served together in the
Yeah,
MTC. Um,
it's funny.
Yeah, and so we get to the MTC. We leave the MTC, and we fly into Edinburgh, and like we get picked up by um, elder, uh, well, the assistants,
Hmm.
or the office elders, and there was an elder there, Elder Thomas from South Africa,
Yeah,
right?
Sean. Hmm.
Yeah, Sean.
We've been in touch
Um,
with him. He's gonna come on the podcast eventually.
yeah. And I tell him I only know one person from South Africa. She lives in my ward, and she ended up marrying a guy who served as mission there. And he's like, "Wait, what's her name?" And I was like, "Candace." And he's like, "That's my ex-girlfriend."
Oh no.
And I'm like, "How small is the world in church?"
That's
Like
crazy.
that's just insane. I know one person from South Africa, and that was his ex.
And they had dated. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, before you get too deep in the mission, come to the end of your mission, October of '05. Tell us about life since you've been home, what you've been up to.
Many things. I got my diagnosis of autism at the age of 28.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And a couple of weeks ago, the diagnosis of ADHD,
Okay.
which has um, really explained a lot. I have not always been the easiest person to get along with,
Hmm.
because of the autism. Sometimes you get miscommunications. Um, but I'm the kind of person who has an extremely broad set of interests. I can talk to anyone about anything, and I'll know something about it.
Hmm.
Other some things you know, learn more about than others, but can typically talk to anyone. The whole commitment pattern back in the day, the finding common beliefs, that was easy for me,
Hmm.
um, because of that. And so um, I, at the end of my mission, I had been writing with someone, but that ultimately didn't feel right, and decided not to pursue that relationship.
Hmm.
Although, lovely sister in church still. Um, But many months later, I had started dating people locally. As my wife told the story, I had been on LinkedIn trying to find a partner. And apparently, I had made a connection with one of her friends, and she referred Sasha to me. And she's like, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, I know him. Let's write to him." We started writing back and forth, and at first it was like, "Oh, hey, cool. I remember that's pretty one from the mission." And so I started writing to her, and what started off as just writing a few messages back and forth ended up being these really long emails, and then eventually some chatting, and then eventually I was like, this keeps taking up more and more of my day. She's really far away. Like, if you were to drive there, it's like 2,700 kilometers to where she was living.
Wow.
That's not something you do in a day. And so I was like, well, either this is going to go somewhere, but then I have to take action, or I have to, if it's not going anywhere, I need to use this time differently. Because one of my goals was to have an eternal family. And I, that being a goal, I wanted to take action. So I asked her, I was like, hey, I have some vacation time I want to take, I need to take, and at work. And I was like, "Do you wanna? Would it be okay if I came over so we could spend my vacation together with you?"
Hmm.
And so we got there, fell in love, and yeah, we've been married for 16 years now. Um,
That's so cool.
I actually, um, well, I went there, we fell in love, became a couple. Then I asked her to come over in for Christmas, because um, where Sasha's from, they celebrate Christmas after New Year's, like January.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the Orthodox Christmas,
okay.
Russian Orthodox. And so I had made plans to take her to the temple, because she didn't have a temple nearby at the time. It had been a really long time since she was able to attend the temple. So I was like, I want to take you there. Meanwhile, I had made plans to propose to her. I had bought an engagement ring, and I decided to propose to her in the temple, in the celestial.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And so the entire session, I've got this ring, and as church-going members know, you change some clothes during the session. Um, and I was very aware that this ring shouldn't slip out of my pocket at any point during this. And then we're in the celestial room, and we wait for everything to die down and everybody to leave. And these are really deep couches, so I didn't quite succeed in slipping all the way out to get on one knee. I kind of slid off and put one knee on the ground. It was kind of awkward, but so I'd said some words, and then I said, "Will you marry me?" And then she said nothing for half an hour. At least that's what it felt like. Sasha recounts this as saying, "Oh, at the time, everything's going through your mind. Oh, it's finally happening. How do I say yes?" And I'm sitting there going, "Man, she's gonna laugh at me." I was like, "What did I do? I'm making such a fool of myself." But eventually, she said yes, and we've been married for 16 years now and have 3 kids. Our oldest daughter was born. Um, we got married. I think Sasha got pregnant after about a month. And she was born, our oldest daughter, Yeva, was born the day before my birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I keep telling her she's the best birthday gift I ever got.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
so we've got a girl who's 15, a boy who's 12, wait, 13. Thir 13, and then our youngest daughter who's 10. Um,
Oh, that's so fun.
yeah. So given the ADHD, I've had many different jobs. I've been fortunate enough to have one of my best friends um, give me work twice now. Second time I'm working for him. And he knows me and my autism, and I'm fortunate enough to have such a good friend who gives me the opportunity, despite my difficulties in communicating with people sometimes, to keep a job and be able to help me pass some people's frustrations with my idiosyncrasies. So
Hmm,
yeah,
interesting. It's
but yeah,
amazing.
I've had many different jobs. I've done pretty much everything you could possibly do within a company except for HR and management.
Wow.
I've done accounting, I've done general administration, I'm doing IT, I've done sales, I've done purchasing, I've done fleet management, office management.
Wow.
I worked in a warehouse. I learned how to drive the 7 metric ton pickup, not pickup truck, forklift.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I've jack of all trades, master of none, but still better than a master of one.
There you
Um,
go.
so yeah,
Wow. Well, good for you. I'm sure that discovering those things health wise has been eye opening to you as far as how to manage yourself moving forward.
it has been. I mean, I went through a 4 year depression.
Yeah.
Um, I've been medication free for about 2 years now.
Hmm.
So I got out of it, but it took some work.
Yeah. Good
And
for you.
I've become an advocate for mental health. It's not talked about often enough, especially in church. And a
Oh,
lot of people hear all the
amen.
positive messages and never hear anyone testifying how they're like struggling or how they can actually find help that's useful to them.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's kind of my mission in life, to help people that are um, how to put this without sounding like I'm bragging. I've been through a lot, and that experience has put me a little bit further ahead than some people might be on their path in life with that
Yeah.
regard. And so I've kind of tried to, as the scriptures teach us, as you have been taught, and it becomes your mission to then teach others and help
Hmm.
those in need of help.
Yeah. That's really admirable. I mean, it's a huge thing in our world today. Mental health and being aware of what's going on inside just as much as what's going on the outside. So that's great. Well, Kevin, take us back now to, if you want to go back through the MTC, any memories there, but then take us to the mission as well.
I remember President Bodine had this crazy rubber tree plant song. The whoops, there goes another rubber tree plant. Like, for those who had him as the mission president, like I still don't remember why we had that. Um, and something I do remember. I mean, there's several memories from NTC, but one of the many ones was the chef seemed to have this surplus of cinnamon, and he would put cinnamon in and on everything. We had pizza, it had cinnamon on it. We had mashed potatoes, it had cinnamon in it. We had soup, it was pumpkin soup with cinnamon in it. It was like he had to get rid of this giant box of cinnamon. I couldn't not taste cinnamon for like those 19 days we were there. It was insane. Yeah.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. That's a unique memory right there.
Yeah. I mean, my autism puts me in a different perspective in life often, and I don't know, that one stuck with me.
Yeah.
Um, I do remember in the MTC we were taught about making outlines and how you had to make an outline for a lesson, and I was like, I mean, I spoke English fairly well back then. It has improved since, but um, I was like, "What's an outline?" I had never heard this word before, and so they explained it to me, and I was like, "Well, that's a dumb way to do it." Um, And throughout my mission, we always had to do strengths and weaknesses with present Marines, and we had to like list, two strengths of our companion, two weaknesses of ourselves, whatever, or the other way around. I can't remember. And my
Hmm.
companions would always be, oh, great scriptural knowledge. Downside dominates the discussions every single time. Um, but I, throughout my adult life, like when I have to teach, when I have to give a talk, I don't write things down. I will mull things over in my head prayerfully. I will read some scriptures. I will read some talks. But when it comes to the point of actually giving the lesson or giving the talk, I've always been of the mind that we got to refer to John 14:26, where it says, "And behold, I will send you the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost. He will teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance whatsoever I have taught unto you." And that's kind of been my modus operandi in any form of teaching I do. I try to study up on the subject. I mean, I knew my lessons, I knew my scriptures, and then I'd let the Spirit help me teach those things that I would be prompted to teach.
Yeah.
Not many of my companions were necessarily able to do that. And I'm not saying I'm better because of that, not at all. But it did mean that every now and again I'd pick up on an investigator being like, I don't quite get that. And my companion's like going off his outline. I'm like, handbrake, just let's rewind a second
Mhm.
and answer your question. And so I would get the name of, Elder Verdegem dominates the discussions. Yeah,
Well,
I'm just trying to do right by my investigators.
because you're answering the questions, not driving the outline. That's I mean, that
Yeah,
I'm the same way. I've always been that way where I would much rather say it from the heart than say it from the page, you know? So,
yeah.
I can
And
appreciate that.
it's something that they've now abolished. They have now since then. I've been speaking to mission. I've been the word mission leader a few times in our ward. It's not something they do anymore. They're encouraged to teach the way I just mentioned. But back
Yeah.
then, they didn't know any better, and they were like, I was like, I
You
don't
were
know,
ahead of the
man.
curve.
I
You're
guess
just ahead
so.
just on top of things.
I guess so. And so we get to the mission home, and President Freens was like, "We have selected the very finest elders to go and teach you." After about a week, I knew that was a lie. Um, uh, my my trainer was Canadian Webb. We had two other Webbs in our mission, and I had Canadian Webb. He was a convert, and
Okay.
he was a great guy. Not necessarily the best rule follower in the mission, which kind of gave it away that I think I saw more movies at members' homes in the 6 weeks I served with him than than I did the 6 weeks before I went on my mission.
Jeez.
Um, but that was a tough area. My first area was the Govan area,
Okay.
which was the
Yeah.
Pollock Ward, south of the Clyde. And for those a little bit familiar with Scottish history, Margaret Thatcher pulled all the ship wharfs out of Glasgow and brought them to someplace in England, which has caused generational unemployment in that region because all of the employment opportunities for all the families that were established there, they were gone. People didn't have an opportunity anymore to work, and so there's a lot of poverty there and a lot of people. And 6 months before I got there, one of the missionaries got stabbed. I never
Yeah.
figured out who that was, but one of them got stabbed. While we were there, Elder Trainer and his companion, forget what his name was, but they ended up being moved to Peterhead to live a quiet life. Um, his companion got beaten to a pulp. We went with our zone leaders. That was Elder Gilmore and Elder Carish at the time.
Uh-huh.
We went in their little Astra um, to go pick him up from the emergency room, and we couldn't recognize his face.
Oh my
Like he,
gosh.
yeah, some mid-20-year-olds had stolen his backpack, and he wanted his scriptures back. There wasn't really anything valuable in there, and he just was like, "Hey, give me back my backpack," and they just beat the snot out of him. So it was a really rough area. I remember while we
Jeez.
were there, Elder Fab and I were sitting on the bus, and or was it with Elder Cooper afterwards? I can't remember. We're sitting in the back of the bus. Suddenly, we hear this loud bang, and the guy sitting on the bench over to our side, like grabs his side and like slumps down, and we're like, "Did he just get shot?" But some Ned, if you hadn't heard that term in a while, some Ned had taken like a brass coupling a plumbing coupling and just chucked it through the window, and it hit the guy square on the ribs.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
there's this violence happening outside, and the bus driver's reaction is like, "All right, everybody off. I gotta wait for dispatch." We're like, "Are you kidding me?" Out into the danger.
Oh my gosh.
Um, Nothing
Wow.
ended up happening to us while we were there. My second companion, I only had my trainer for 6 weeks, was Danny Cooper, a Coop dog. Um, he was this really funny guy. He had a bit of a past, um, and he spoke with quite kind of a redneck accent. And I copy accents. And gosh darn, I cannot speak normal for about 3 days. Until I got my own accent back, which is what I've been told, a Midwestern American accent.
Okay.
Um,
Where's
I
he
don't know.
from originally? Do you know?
I thought he came on his mission from somewhere in the south of Utah, but
Okay.
he had a bit of a southern drawl. Um, and I remember this really funny moment. We had taken the bus to the south of our area where we hadn't proselyted before. It was his plan. But it was rainy, it was cold, as Scotland tends to be, and we got on one of those double decker buses. We sat on the ground floor of the bus, and this bus had a busted heater, like it was on full blast. And there was something wrong with, like, I don't know if something was loose in the engine or whatever, but the whole bus was like shaking. It was vibrating.
Oh
So
wow.
imagine you're cold, you're tired, you're a little wet, damp from. So you get on this bus, and I fell asleep.
It's like a dry sauna.
It's like a dry sauna. That's vibrating. So you're kind of like, getting massaged.
A dry sauna massage chair.
Yeah, pretty much. And so this bus goes to the south of area and loops back around, and then kind of makes this figure eight where the middle of our area, it was a kind of a triangle shape. We had a bus line that went this way and one that went north to south. And I wake up with a throbbing pain in my shin. And I'm like, what's happening? It was Elder Cooper kicking my shin in. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, dude, I have shouted your name. I have like shook you. I slapped you in the face. You wouldn't wake up. He's
My
like, I was
gosh.
worried something happened to you. See, he found no better way than to start kicking my shin.
Gosh.
What had happened was we had gone to like the final stop where we're supposed to get off. We had just slept through it, both of us, and we were halfway back up to our apartment
No.
by the time we woke up. So that was funny.
That is pretty good.
And I mean, I at that point was still dreaming of Bonnie Scotland and Roman in the Gloamin'. Um, and then I got shipped to East Kilbride, which is spelled East Kilbride, and it's like concrete city. Like it is one of the most depressing places to be in, because for those who remember, you'd see a neighborhood in Scotland and you'd see one of the windows, like one of the buildings would have these metal plates in front of the windows and the doors, and you'd know that this neighborhood was going to get torn down. Like the council would buy out people's houses or relocate them to newly built areas, and then they would gradually board up the other houses so squatters couldn't get in. And it was that it was East Kilbride was originally built to take in the surplus of people from Glasgow that whose houses had been boarded up. And so it was that kind of place. You can take the people out of the slums, but you can't take the slums out of the people type thing.
Right.
So it was a very difficult area for me. I didn't find a lot of connection with the members there. And my companion was Elder Hare, who's the cousin of Sister Bond that I heard you're having on next week.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. That didn't quite gel. We had our issues. I'm not going to expand on them. But when we got that transfer call and found out we were sticking together for another 6 weeks, that was not a good moment. He did not want to work at some point. He had blamed me and convinced our ward mission leader and the mission president that I was some lazy bum, and it was him, but I wasn't believed. And then later on, he president put some other elders that, according to present, were better, harder working missionaries than me, and they experienced the exact same thing with all their hair. And so he was trunky. He was pretty much done with his mission at that time, and so um, it wasn't me, but it did mean 3 months of just misery. 4 season days, though. We had snow, sunshine, rain. Like we, I did win. I did earn a set of golf clubs there.
Really?
Yeah, we were volunteering for the British Heart Foundation, and I am a salesman. It's in my blood, and so she was like, "Hey, I had eyed in the back. There was a bag of golf clubs, and um, I was like, oh man, that would be sweet." And she's like, "You know what? If you can sell all these like ribbons, you remember the heart shaped ribbons for £1? She's like, if you can sell all the ones we have, you can have it." In about an hour and a half, I sold 200 of those
Wow.
things. Yeah. And she's like, "Well, I guess these golf clubs are yours." And then I couldn't take them with me to my next area, so they ended up like in our bedroom behind a door where the water heater was. That's where they ended up, and I'm sure some elder found them eventually. It was like, "Dude, there's golf clubs here." It's like the ultimate flat find.
Wow.
Um, that was
That's
about
pretty
the,
funny.
the the better memories in that area. Although we did have um, no, wait, that was in a different area. In my first area, we did help a sister who was a little bit inactive and was struggling a little bit with the word of wisdom. Um, Elder Cooper and I had gotten her back to full activity, and as far as I know, she is still in full activity. She ended up being a counselor in the Stake Relief Society presidency. She ended up becoming a temple worker, and so that, even though we did baptize, I baptized a couple of people on my mission. Many of them are no longer, if not most of them, are no longer active members of the church. But at
Hmm.
least we brought somebody who had made covenants back into the fold, and that was really sweet.
That's great.
Um, in that first area, um, rewinding 2 seconds, we did have a Turkish investigator, and she was this really sweet lady whose name I can't remember right now, and her kid would translate for us.
Hmm.
And at some point, I wanted to say some things in Turkish, and I wanted to say to her, you've been doing really well with your scripture study. And so I asked the son to tell me how to say that in Turkish. And so he, he told me what to say, and I said it, and she's like, and she got up and went to the kitchen, started cooking food. I was like, "What did you tell me to say to her?" And he's like, "I'm hungry. When's dinner?" I was like, "Are you kidding me, you little turd?" Um, we did end up baptizing her, but man, good times. That was
That's
we had the Ibrox, the Glasgow Rangers stadium was in our area. On
yeah.
match day, it was a weird vibe. You'd have people just shouting at random at you. "How about those Rangers?" I was like, the
Okay.
the yeah, sure. The Elder Squirm present was a Celtics fan in that ward, and at some point he's teaching the brethren in the chapel and using the now cleared sacrament table as a staging area for some props. And one of his object lessons involved some like Celtics fan gear, and some of the brethren were like, "Get that! That's sacrilege! Get that off the sacrament
Oh
table!"
my gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Oh man. But then eventually I left East Kilbride and went to one of my two most favorite areas on my mission. I was in the Borders for 6 months, and we were in the Borders district with Jack Bryce, you know,
Yeah.
um, not unknown to you.
Yeah.
And that was one of the best summers of my life. We were really lucky with the weather. We had a car. I got like super fat because if we had to tract 2 streets over, we'd move the car. Um, and this is average attendance in the Galashiels ward branch. We lived in Selkirk, went to church in Galashiels. Average attendance between 25 and 35 people.
Yeah.
My
Wow.
record there was 9 dinner appointments a week.
Holy cow.
Yeah, we had like dinner
It's amazing.
every night of the week and 2 lunch appointments at some point. The members loved me. It was a huge contrast with East Bride, where we had maybe 1 or 2 a week.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I my first companion there was Elder France, Ezra Nathaniel France. The guy had a guitar and knew 3 songs, and was a Neil Young fan. Um, he that was it wasn't so much that he annoyed me. It was that he I guess felt quite good about himself and his accomplishments in life, and uh, some of it was BS, and I knew it was BS, but I was like, you know, man, you do you. Um, he had a flair. He had once worked as a lumberjack in Washington State. He was quite a character. But we surfed together. We had an apartment, I remember, with one of those electric showers. Remember those little electrical units with like
Yeah.
zero pressure?
Oh
Takes like
yeah.
half an hour to get one arm warm. It was ridiculous. And then I was on
Yes.
exchanges with our zone leaders, and they had this amazing shower that was not only like great temperature, but huge pressure. And I remember going on our exchanges going, you know what, man, this is gonna be good. Yeah.
That's great.
That was good times. Um, but I served there with first Elder France, and then after that, it was Elder Trainer, the one whose companion had gotten beaten up in
Yeah.
Paisley. And he, at the time, and it was quite known in the mission, had gotten addicted to cell phone usage. Like he racked up massive bills. And one morning, I wake up. At this point, his brother had come to stay over with us. Like he had a brother who was about to go on a mission. He had convinced president to let him stay at our place for a week. That might have been a lie, but
Oh
what
dear.
was I gonna do? And then one morning I wake up and all of his stuff is gone, and I just barely catch him like trying to leave as I wake up, trying to leave like with the phone and everything. He was like, "I'm going home." I'm going home. And I was like, "Sorry, what?" And he's like, I'm like, "You were just gonna leave me here without a phone?" And so we ended up going to Edinburgh, where he took a train or something home with his brother, and I had to sit there and wait for some elders to come save me. So
Wow.
yeah, that was interesting. And then I got the wonderful, amazing, awesome elder Parmenter. Um, he and we really got along quite well. He was one of my favorite companions. One of our companionship unifiers was we had a really big kitchen table, like ping pong table sized, and we were like, we got to do something with this table. So we had bought pallets, like not pallets, paddles,
Paddles. Yeah.
paddles, yeah. Um, and we were playing ping pong every now and again as a companionship unifier. At some point, he like swings, misses, and blames the chair by going, "Stupid chair." And so that kind of became a running joke whenever something would happen, and it was clearly him. I just go, "Stupid chair." I just not blame him. But
That's great.
he had not driven stick before much. I knew how, but didn't have a driver's license. So I had to kind of like teach him, and I had to grab the wheel about 5 times on the way from Edinburgh to our apartment, because he had only served in like urban like areas, built up areas, and he was like, "The scenery is so pretty." I like grabbed the wheel to, to not like crash and die. Um, we once we had a district meeting. I think when Jack was serving there, and we drove from Selkirk to Dumfries, where their apartment was.
Mhm.
Um, and it has been, at some point, it got an award for the most scenic route in all of like Europe. It was
Oh wow.
beautiful. I remember we drive up. to this valley, and as we're about to like descend into the valley, we see clouds literally rolling into the valley and rolling back out.
Wow.
That was amazing. I think it was with other France driving at the time, and we got there into the fog. And suddenly, there's sheep just in the middle of the road. I was like, "Whoa!" But fog thick as pea soup. We almost had well, I don't know if the car would have gotten much damage. There was a lot of wool, but
Yeah.
yeah, um,
Gosh.
man, that was. And the funny thing is, at some point when you're that rural, there's like a sign that says everything from here on out is pasture, including the road. And you drive over a cattle grid, and at some point there's a cow just stood in the middle of the road. We have keep in mind we have zero cell reception, zero. And Eller France decides to drive with our little car off the road to go around this cow. And I'm like, he just stood there for a while honking. Cow was like, whatever. I was like, dude, I'll get out. I'll make it move. He's like, no, it's too dangerous. I was like, dude, I grew up in the countryside. Like, I spent time on my friend's farm. It's a cow. It's fine. It's
Yeah.
just a curious animal. I can get it to scoot. It's not. I could see it wasn't a bull.
Mhm.
Um, and no. He starts driving off the road, and I told him off. I was like, "Are you kidding me? If we would have gotten stuck," I was like, "We haven't seen a house for like 3 miles. We have zero cell reception. We would have had to pass a lot more cows than just this one." Um,
Oh, dear.
yeah, no deer, cows. Sorry, dad jokes. I've ever
No g
since my wife popped out the first kid, that kind of downloaded dad jokes into my brain. Um, yeah. Um,
Was it at
we
this point that you went on exchanges with Jack, or was that later in the mission?
Yes. I went on exchanges with Jack, and we're in Hoyk, which is spelled Hawick with CK. And we're walking through a neighborhood. We're about to have a dinner appointment that evening, and we're walking around that neighborhood, and some kid just like comes running up, like Jack. He's tall. Jack
Yeah.
is really tall. I'm 6 foot. Jack's probably close to 7 foot. And this kid, like, he must have been like 3 or 4 years old, jumps up, tries to hit him in the his privates, and yells effort at him. And Jack and I are just looking at each other. We're like, did this just happen? And we look over to the house the kid came from, and there's this deadbeat dad, like 25-year-old something, just looking out the window going, "Don't you touch my kid." And we're like, just come discipline your little, oh man. Yeah. You
Jack sent over a memory from it was probably from that exchange. He said, "I remember going on exchanges with him, and he was practicing his martial arts kicks on the tops of dandelions while we were chapping doors." Do you
uh,
remember that?
no, but it's something that I've been known to do. I would just like, I don't know. I have ADHD, man. So if I get distracted and I see dandelions, I just kick the tops of dandelions off. I just, I don't know if I would call it my martial arts skills. I was a bit of a doofus back then. Still am in some regards, but yeah, that's well possible. Um, I I did go on exchange with with his companion at the time, Mother Karish, who had been my zone leader previously.
Mhm.
Great guy. Elder Karish once confessed to me that while he was an office elder, like somehow like some radio had started playing Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby, and he had to like crank it up. Like that was his confession, like he had to like listen to Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. I'm like, such a badass. Uh,
That's
but
funny.
great guy. Some members had made him a Superman cape for Elder Karish because his first name's Kenton, and so Kent,
Yeah,
Superman. And some members had made him this awesome cape, and we like got several pictures of him like with the cape. It was good.
that is cool.
It's I do have a memory with Elder Karish though when he was my zone leader in Govan. And that was something Sasha mentioned before, that she wasn't always, agreeing with the way President Vreens ran the mission. And I had an experience there that kind of was endemic to the mission. President Vreens was very much a businessman, quite a successful one. But he ran the mission like a business.
Hmm.
I remember there were some elders who were like trying to, I didn't want to give up, go home, and he did everything for them to keep them there. Me not being a number monkey and being like, if I can only record if something's a first lesson, if that actually meant, gets all the parameters that you have to hit, I'm not going to write it down. And so at some point, President Vreens told me, if your numbers don't improve, I'm going to send you home, which is a
Hmm.
terrible thing to say to somebody who is sacrificing 2 years of their young life to
Yeah.
serve the Lord. But I remember being on exchange with other carriage. We're GQing golden questions, and he talks to this couple. He pretty much force feeds them a first lesson. And then he's like, "Is it okay if we say a quick prayer?" And as he stood there praying with these people are looking around like, "What the heck is happening?" And I remember those people like walk away from that exchange looking very bewildered, and Elder Karish going, "Oh, great. I taught like so many principles and we had a prayer, so we get to count it as the first lesson taught." And I'm thinking to myself, I know you mean very well, because he meant no malice whatsoever. He wasn't that kind of guy that was trying to be manipulative or whatever. He was trying to do good, but I was like, this ain't it, man. I was like, this is not you. The next time these people are going to see missionaries, they're gonna turn tail and run.
Yeah.
You did not succeed in bringing anyone closer to Christ. I was a greenie at the time. I didn't say those words to him. And again, I know he meant no harm whatsoever, but that was the kind of mission President Vreens was running. I remember our zone leaders at some point had finally been able to convince President that we should work more with the members, because, you know, door to door GQing, it wasn't really giving the results we were all hoping for. But then he got like the tap from higher on that said, "Hey, why are your numbers so low?" And we were back to GQing and knocking doors, chapping. And so
Gosh.
he was a bit of a number monkey, our president. And so, just like Sasha, never trained, was never. I was made co-senior at some point. Like that was like that's supposed to be a thing. Like that, man. Um,
You were
Also,
king of the world.
somebody had also started a rumor about me that was just a blatant lie, and it kind of kept traveling. And president chose to believe others over me each and every single time, and I never understood why.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's
Interesting.
so I finished there with Elder Parmenter, and oh yeah, I almost forgot when I got to the area with Elder France. Um, the previous elders, because we were whitewashing, I ended up whitewashing into 4 of my areas, and I was whitewashed out of my last one. I had
Wow.
bishops and branch presidents calling President Vreens the whitewash king because it would happen so often. Um, they had left a tape recording. Instead of writing everything in the area book, they had left a tape recording with one of those idiots, like on a recorder in the background, just like playing songs. And
Oh
they're
my
like,
god.
"Oh, we're gonna talk about this investigator and this and that. Here's a musical intermezzo brought to you by Elder What's His Face." And we're sitting there going, "You morons!" Like we had to like physically write down everything, like replay the tape in the car because we didn't have another tape player.
Oh my gosh.
So, and we ended up towards the end of the time I spent. I was there for 6 months. We bumped into people that had been progressing a lot, but they had failed to put it on the tape.
Oh
And
my
so
word.
that was a young family that was nearly ready for baptism that fell away because the contact was lost. And that's why every single time, I mean, I whitewashed into so many areas. I had to clean up so much administration. Like, remember those maps you were able to buy, the light blue ones, and you divide
Mhm.
it up into areas that were like, so you could group things together. And like, I made binders with like, we've got this member and that investigator, and if we serve in that area today. We could visit these less actives, and we can do this work and see this investigator. And I did that so many times. It was ridiculous. I whitewashed into East Bride, into um, Galashiels. I whitewashed into Dundee. I'm pretty sure I whitewashed into Inverness, although that was a 4-man flat, so it was dividing up a new area, and I got whitewashed out of my last area. So
Wow.
that makes 5. Yeah, it was insane. So imagine 6 months there, amazing summer. Members love me. I love the members. Great memories. And I get shipped off to the north right before Christmas. I was like, "What's up with this?" But ended up spending 7.5 months in Inverness,
Wow.
in the Highland Zone.
Hmm.
We also have a hoodie, the Highland Zone,
That's right.
and we had an amazing time there. We had several companions there. I started there with other Fisher, not other
Matt.
fish, Matt Fisher. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, I think it was my autism that kind of caused communication errors between us. I really liked the kid. He was super frustrated with me. Like, did not know how to like deal with me, I guess. I don't know. I didn't have anything against him. It just, I guess for him it didn't click.
Hmm.
I thought it was a little sad, but it was what it was. I was there for 7.5 months. Elder Cook was my ZL there for 6 months. We lived in the same
Wow.
apartment for 6 months. Um, that was really insane. We Elder Fisher did teach me how to go downstairs on a bike, because we had gotten mountain bikes because we were living in the zone leaders area, and we
Right.
did tons of walking. I remember one night um, it took us nearly an hour to walk back to our apartment. Towards the end of my mission, I had lost a ton of weight by then because we came from a car area, went to a walking biking area that was in the Highlands, so very hilly. I lost tons of weight. I ended up being able to fit into one of their cook suits
Oh.
because, yeah, like I got really fit there.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I started there with Matt Fisher, and we had gotten these mountain bikes. Like, I forget what they were called, Halfords. They're like a car parts thing, but you
Mm.
also went there for your bike. So we had gotten these 2 matching mountain bikes. They didn't have fenders or anything, so like splash guards or whatever. And so
Yeah.
we bought those. We attached them. First thing Fisher does when he gets them is pops a wheelie and breaks off his fender, the brand new one. We had to wait a week to get a new one for him. Meanwhile, he's got this brown streak up his back from the mountain bike. It's
He
like,
forgot about that part, didn't he? That's funny.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, good times, man. One of the areas we had was Nairn, which is a little coastal town that you have to take the train to get to. It was an amazing small little community, really beautiful bit of Scotland. Um, and then I did 2 transfers with Fisher, and then I had 2 transfers with Anderton,
Okay.
English elder. Had a
Yeah.
great had a great click with him. Um, and then I ended up serving with Nelson, but
Kevin
no, no,
Nelson. Trying to remember which.
the not Kevin Nelson. Kevin Nelson ended up being AP. This was the other Nelson with the glasses.
Um,
If
Dave.
you have,
Is it David?
no, no, no. Um, this,
Matthew.
yeah, I think so. Matthew Nelson.
Okay.
He has he been on the podcast?
I haven't got in
No,
touch with him yet.
no.
No.
He was special. Um, I don't know what it was. In retrospect, he might be on the spectrum in the
Hmm.
same way I am,
Yep.
but nothing about him felt genuine. Like you would
Hmm.
be talking to a group of elders, you'd laugh, and he'd laugh just a little bit too late and a little bit too fake sounding.
Oh,
He scared away 5 of our investigators because he wouldn't ask find out questions. You'd have the feeling you were in some noir movie where the Gestapo has sat you in a dark room with like a desk light in your face asking questions.
oh no.
Yeah. And
Jeez.
I remember he was zone leader in Aberdeen. We were there for a Christmas zone conference, I think, and I went off on him back then because he had shared this thing where like, oh, usually we would like do GQing here, but we found too many people for the other elders to teach, so we stopped doing that. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I gave him an earful. I was like, dude, if you're here to be a tool in the hands of the Lord, if the Lord has these people ready, but they happen to be in your area, and the Spirit tells you go there and find these people, who cares? The
Yeah.
sum total is a net positive. And he was like, yeah, but I want to baptize people too. And I was like, oh man. So we did not get off on a good foot. And then Cook tells me, he's like, I just got transfer calls. You're not gonna like this. And I got Elder Nelson. And I remember Elder Nelson would write letters to the mission president saying, "Oh, Elder Verdegem's giving me a nervous breakdown," because I would call on every single one of his like not being genuine. I'm a genuine person. I'm very much what you see is what you get. I'm honest. I'm open. He fake is the only thing I could think to describe him. I don't think I ever got to know the actual Matthew Nelson.
Hmm.
And I think that's a shame because he had a lot of skills, a lot of talents. He just chose to apply them in a way that did not gel with how I see the world and try to do the Lord's work. Um,
Interesting. Wow.
yeah. From there, I went to Dundee with Elder Stout. Elder Stout
Okay.
had gotten his jaw broken
That's right.
um, from a punch in the face, from doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing, and he ended up going home on medical terms because they had like they had like wired his jaw shut or something, or it wouldn't heal properly. He didn't want to work. Whatever. We spent a lot of time in one of the most filthy apartments I've ever seen. Sasha was describing an elder's apartment. This was nothing like you'd ever seen. We got to Dundee, man. I called Elder Lemon. I was like, there is not a cleaning product in sight. We're meant to use our budget to replenish products as they are used up. I was like, this place needs like 2 sets of cleaning stuff, and we're going to use up the first one just to get this place clean enough. I want them reimbursed, which I did. The
Wow.
shower had like black mold, like all
Oh
on the
no.
wall. The floor in the kitchen had this like really cheap linoleum, and some elders at some point had decided to try to fry their own food there without using an extraction fan. All the cupboards, the ceiling, the floor was covered in a layer of yellowed grease.
Oh my
There was a
word.
there was a garbage bin, a metal garbage bin stood by the entry of the kitchen, and when I went to lift it up, the bottom had like rusted out along the edge, and the bottom just was so stuck to the sticky floor that when I went to lift it up, it just stayed there and all the trash fell out.
Oh my gosh. What a nightmare.
The
Oh my
their
gosh.
their vacuum cleaner hadn't been in operation for however long they had been there and hadn't bothered asking the office for a replacement. And so it took us 3 days just to make that place livable. Like we started with the bedroom so that we would be sure to have a place that we could actually sleep.
Mhm.
And then imagine President Reams comes and does an apartment inspection after we had scrubbed this place top to bottom. It took us days to get it livable. And came in here as like, this will not do. I was like, President, you don't understand. We spent 3 days just like getting it up to this standard. Like this is like,
Oh my
he's like,
god.
I know, but this apartment won't do. Like as an apartment, that's just no.
Oh man.
Ah man, that was something else. I'm not gonna name shame the others who left it that way, but they know who they are. I ended up serving with one of them in my last area. I guess I kind of well
Yeah,
Yeah,
you name shamed him.
name shamed them. Um,
It's all good.
um, but yeah, they just didn't care, I guess. But that was a difficult time because pretty much all Stout wanted to do was go to the library and email and whatever, and just go shopping or whatever. Eventually, because he was sick a lot, I went on exchange with the zone leaders a lot. And they had an apartment with a colony of seagulls living on the rooftops. Dundee is filled with seagulls,
Yeah.
and they hated me with a passion, with an absolute passion. There was one seagull who lived on the chimney stack of an old factory we had to walk by every time on our way to church because we would walk from our apartment past this place, go up a little bit, and then through the graveyard and there was just a beautiful walk path through the graveyard, and we'd end up at Bingham Terrace at
Yeah.
church. Every single time we passed there, the seagull would see me and dive bomb me, trying to peck me on my head every single time. Never my companion. Always, it would dive bomb and try to peck me on the head. It hated me. And then at some point, you're gonna laugh your head off hearing this. I know my companion did. Um, we're walking on the town square. We're on our way somewhere, and it's kind of a general area where everyone can come and GQ. Our zone leaders were in the British Heart Foundation charity shop at the time doing service, and there's a seagull on a lamppost in front of me. Like I'm walking perpendicular. No, perpendicular is this way, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm
Parallel.
walking parallel to the lamppost. This seagull, so I'm here walking. The seagull takes off, like aligns itself, does a bit of a dip, poops on my forehead, and lands on the lamppost behind me, turns around and laughs.
Oh my
Kid you
gosh.
not, it's laughing its head off. It's mocking me. The
How?
seagull was possessed by Satan itself.
Oh my gosh.
It had hit me on the head, like right here, like it splattered on my suit. It splattered on my companion who was walking next to me. Stout was laughing his head off.
What
We didn't have a tissue anywhere.
are
So
the
the only thing
chances of that?
so
My
so
gosh.
there's no chance Satan did it on purpose. Um And so the only thing we could do was go to the British Heart Foundation where we knew our zoniers would be in because we had done some service there too. Like, hey, can we have some paper towels? So I mean, I was constantly like, you'd walk to the zonier's apartment and seagulls would just try to nail you. Like if you parked a car there, that paint job was ruined forever because
Oh my
you'd come back
word.
and you'd have to like scrape off a layer of like guano. It was ridiculous. Um, Other than that, though, Dundee was an absolute stunning, beautiful, lovely city.
Mhm.
Just the seagulls, man. If I don't care that they're Utah state bird, I prayed to the Lord to like magically grant me a shotgun. I mean, no, no, I hate seagulls with a passion.
Well, and
Um,
the crazy thing too is that was when I first met you. And I remember I offended you so bad because we had that zone activity playing like sports at the park.
yeah. I
And I
remember
first
her
met
sister, like she like it was touch football. I was trying to dodge her so bad. I forget which sister it was, but the grass was really slippery, and she just tagged me right as I was trying to dodge, and I like slide and like land on the ground so bad. Is that
no,
is that the moment you're referring to?
uh-huh, 'cause I remember we played it wasn't flag football, but you were right, it was like a touch football, and I
Yeah.
remember I introduced myself to you, and me being an arrogant, stupid American missionary, you said you were from Belgium, and I had the audacity to say, "Oh, Germany," and you were like, "Hell no." You straight up just said I was like and I didn't know anything any better. I was just like in hindsight, I look back at it and I'm like, "Man, that was such a horrible thing to say to Kevin. I'm so sorry about that." But in the moment, I was just like, "Oh, because I knew nothing, you know, I was just stupid American kid." So
It
please forgive me for that.
I have blamed the American schooling system ever since that moment. Um No, to be honest, I don't feel bad. I don't even recall that moment, to be honest. But I have never had a high opinion about the American education system, despite teachers' utmost efforts. The system is failing them a lot. You're in real estate. You probably know that school budgets are often funded by property taxes. And so,
Right.
if you grow up in a well off area, there's a lot of property tax, which means the schools are funded better. If you grow up in the ghetto, property taxes are lower because the value of the houses is less. And
Yeah.
so, your school doesn't get funded. And so, it's this absurd system. And even then, we had a guy from here in Belgium. He went to PYU to college, and
Hmm.
like I guess the first year in college is kind of like a general subjects kind of
Right.
year.
Hmm.
Um, and he said like it was so stupid. He was like, I was getting math. We were getting in the fourth year of high school. We have 6 years of high school. He's like, this is math from when I was like 15. By the end
Oh,
of the first
jeez.
year, he's like, why am I paying like 8 grand for the privilege of learning math I got 2 years ago? So
Jeez. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
agree. I agree.
it's sad. I'd hate to think what would happen if people tried homeschooling their kids. Coming
Oh,
from that kind of education. It's one thing if you're a professor yourself, but you know,
it's happening more and more often at this point. So who knows? We'll see what the next generation looks like, and you and
well,
I can both chat more about that later.
yeah, it's interesting. And so I was there for 2 transfers, and then I ended up going to Greenock, um, serving there with the elder who shall remain nameless because I don't want to name shame him. Um, but
Come on, come on, say his
gr-
name.
green, green. um, sorry, I had a cough, bad cough. Um, I mean, great guy, but just um, let's just say he wasn't the bravest of men. I remember we're waiting for a train, and there's some Neds. They're like 14, and they start like harassing us. And I'm at the end of my mission. I got like 2 weeks left, and I'm like, I've had it, man. So I just like tell them off for like being cheeky to us, and they kind of give up. And I turn around, and he's gone. He's like he just went around the corner.
Oh no.
He's like, I was like, "Where'd you go?" He's like, What if they had a knife, man?" I was like, "Are you kidding me? They're 14. I'd have thumped them on the head or something. I don't know." I was like, "Oh man,
Wow.
Ned's." I remember my first area. We'd never gone south of because like the area around the church was really bad. Like the windows, like you know how a lot of chapels, even in the U.S., that would have a gym part with like a stage or whatever. Like you'd
Right.
have like the metal grid on the windows to prevent like a ball or a basketball to fly through.
Mm-hmm.
Like they would have those on the outside of the windows to protect the church from stuff. I remember we're there for my first ward council, and something just randomly hits the window, like the metal, like something gets thrown against it, and the brethren there don't even like. They're like, yeah, whatever. So we're going south of the church. We'd never done that before. We're looking for the bishop had asked us to go over the list of like 700 members, trying to find them, and we knock on this one door, and somebody like some kid opens the door, and somebody from the living room are like, oh, is so and so here? They're like, they died 10 years ago, and I'm like.
Oh my
I
gosh.
was like, I don't think anybody's worked this member list for a while.
Holy cow.
And so we keep going after that, trying to find a different place. We turn around the corner, and there's like 14 Neds. Just like they see us, they go, Mormons, and come running towards us. I was like, well, this could either go like really funny or really bad. It ended up being funny, but man, yeah, I
Where
was that
did your
was a scary
companion run
moment.
away at that point too?
No, no, no. That was Canadian Web at the time, I
Oh, okay.
think, and yeah, he knew how to stand his ground.
That's funny.
He would have been able to punch him and then say sorry. Um, but yeah, man. And so Greenock, it was a tough area to get any kind of work done because the people weren't very receptive to the gospel. I did end up being the ward pianist there or organist because
Really?
I took musical theory when I was in high school as an extracurricular, not in high school but a separate like musical academy. I had done 1 year classical guitar, 2 years of musical theory, and I knew where the notes were. Like I could read sheet music, but just the alto and soprano part, and not the bass and tenor, because that's in a different key. And so I had self-taught how to play like the those two notes like throughout hymns. And
Mhm.
after church, I'm kind of practicing. We're waiting for some member or whatever, and the bishop comes wandering in because the elderly couple that had been assigned to that ward that was responsible for the music had just left. He heard me playing. He's like, "Elder," I was like, "No, no."
Oh
Next Sunday, I
gosh.
was there. Come, you saints. Um,
Yeah. I learned
but
I learned that way too. I was like, you don't even pretend you can play the piano. Like
oh no, no.
someone will find you.
Someone will find you if you have a skill in church and you show it once. You're doomed to be asked to do it for.
That's right.
Um, but yeah, and so yeah, I mean, great times. Um, the one of the most two Christmases obviously on the mission. The
Mhm.
first one was kind of generic, but the second one was pretty epic. Um, we had gotten permission to get the entire zone together to celebrate Christmas together, and members had donated food and we're cooking it ourselves. So some member had like donated a turkey. I was making soup, but to make the the thing the place festive, we didn't have any decorations, right? So our zone leader said it was either Cook and um, Bruce. Um, man, I know him as Bruce. Cook's companion at the time. I
Mhm.
forget. Yeah. Well, that was a nickname one of the investigators gave them, Bruce. Funny thing was, my parents back home had adopted a cat, a stray cat. They were like, "Oh, we're looking for a name." I was like, "Call him Bruce." That cat ended up like turning 16 or something with the name Bruce. Um, but they had borrowed just a hacksaw from some members, and they
Mhm.
went out into the wild and cut down some random spruce
Oh
in
my
the
gosh.
woods, put it in their car totally illegally. And then we got home and we're like, now what are we gonna do with this? And this was the time when the Joy to the World DVDs had come out. And so we were told that the old VHS tapes that were from like the Christmas thing we used to do. Like they were
Mhm.
like, oh, just throw them out. And so they had found no better way than to turn a bucket upside down, cut a hole to put this tree in, and then cram these VHSs in the base to keep the thing upright. And then we used pass along cards and stuff just to like decorate the tree. But that was, I mean, Elder Osmond was there. Some other people were there. Man, that was like the most insane Christmas ever. Like we kind of decided, just as for just for giggles, to do away with the elder so and so and just go by each other's first names to have a sense of normality just for Christmas. Um, and then the next morning we all wake up and there was snow. It was like the Christmas miracle thing.
Wow.
There was like this much snow, and nobody had seen it coming because the weather forecast didn't call for it. But we woke up, there was this much snow. I remember my companion at the time, Elder Nelson, had made what would you call him, snowman, a small
Mhm.
snowman, and then Cook ran it over with the car on purpose.
Jeez.
Man, that was funny stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I
Right.
had some moments where I really struggled with mental health as well, because I remember, um, being in that apartment, waking up at night, just completely uneasy, and just sitting in the living room crying because I
Mhm.
was really struggling. Um, Mind you, there is one. Maybe I'll do this one a really funny moment. I talk in my sleep. And I had companions tell me that I would teach entire first lessons in my sleep out loud. Like,
Oh,
especially in
no,
the beginning of my
really?
mission where we're trying to do the memorization thing.
Right?
I would teach entire first. I'd wake up so tired. And one morning, imagine there's a four man flat, and the four of us sleep in one bedroom and two bunk beds.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, close quarters. And this one morning, I wake up and everybody's already up, which was kind of odd. And everybody's already up, and they're in the living room, and I walk in and I like go and grab some cereal or whatever, and everybody's looking at me funny. I was like, what's going on here? And they're like, you don't remember anything? I was like, remember what? They're like, dude, you scared the shiznit out of us. I was like, what do you mean? Apparently, in the middle of the night, I had yelled, "No, Satan!" in the middle of
My God. Oh, that's too funny.
and I had no recollection of it. But I was like, guys, you should be happy. They're like, what do you mean we're freaked out? I was like, imagine if I had gone, yes, Satan, wouldn't that have been so much worse?
Jeez Louise.
Oh man.
Did they say how long they'd been up from when you
No,
said
no,
that?
no, 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 no. I don't remember. I don't remember. I think it was Kyle Leet, Elder Cook, Charles Cook, and Bruce. My goodness, I can't remember his real name. We just called him Bruce all the time because it was so funny. It had this really eccentric investigator, old lady that had like the most eccentric, weird lady, but she kept wanting to learn more, so they kept teaching her, and she would always call Cook, Charles, and for some reason she called the poor other elder Bruce, even though that wasn't even his name. And for the life, I'm so bad with names, like I can't remember his real name now. We just called him Bruce all the time. Yeah,
Oh,
man.
man. When you figure it out, let me know. I'd be curious to
Yeah,
know who it was. That's quite a unique nickname for sure.
yeah. It was an English elder. He had a bit of a quiff in his hair, short black hair. Was it Burton? No, something with a B. He was
Bergen?
on Bergen, Sam Bergen. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Um, and you guys were talking about Elder Bear, and he was in our zone at the time, and he was the kind of guy who would enjoy wrestling other elders every now and again.
Mhm.
And I had wanted to wrestle him, and he was like, "No, no." I was like, "Well, why do you keep putting that off?" And eventually, he confessed to me he had this recurring nightmare where he wrestled me and accidentally killed me. Like he dreamt about that twice.
What?
I kid you not. And that was his whole like whenever he was around me, he was like walking on eggshells, not to even bump into me because of this nightmare he kept having of like wrestling me and accidentally like snapping my neck, breaking me in some wrestling move. I was like, dude,
That's
chill.
funny.
It's like
I'm gonna ask him about that. That's too good.
Yeah, when she mentioned Elder Bear, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. He used to have this thing. Elder,
They were standing with Stratton, and they had to like other cook said, "Come on, hit me like between his legs," and he was
like
like, "Arr!"
kick me in the
That was like
groin.
the kick
Oh
itself.
my
And
That like
I was like,
Cook was the weirdest guy, like
like two
hardworking,
guys.
but such like a goofball, like
yeah,
pretty insane.
Oh, cook
Yeah,
from Manchester.
yeah, from Manchester, huge.
that's right.
Imagine it's like Sam Bergen, Cook. They're all Man United fans, like heavy,
Right?
like generational, and and then Nelson arrives in our apartment with like a Man City top,
Oh no.
Yeah, man, that did not go down well. Like British people take their football way too seriously, man.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
funny.
I mean, Americans can take their hand egg quite serious as well, but it's hey, don't come tell me it's football. You rarely kick the ball. You're throwing an egg. It's not even ball shaped. It's you don't get to call that football and then be like, "Oh, it's soccer." No. Like you guys come up with the new name. The rest of the world calls it football as it should be.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh,
Oh man.
Daniel Radcliffe? That's from Harry Potter. You mean
No,
Daniel Conway?
no, there was Daniel Connor. No, there was like some stairs with air.
Sasha has this crazy talent where she can go down the alphabet, and when she hits that letter, she'll suddenly remember somebody's name. Like I don't know how she does it. I once did the math. I think throughout the course of a typical mission, you get to know and remember about 2,000 names. Like
Oh
I
my
think,
gosh.
yeah, for investigators that you're, repeat teaching members, less actives, other missionaries, about 2,000 names. By the
That
time I
sounds
came
about
home,
right.
yeah, by the time I came home, I'm so bad with names. By the time I came home, there were members from my stake, and keep in mind we had a stake of maybe 600 people, so youth that I would go to camp and youth conference with, like I would know their parents, but I came back, I couldn't remember their names. Like members I had known my entire life, I couldn't remember the names. It's just like, it's kind of like you've got the set table and you just add on more names, and as you keep pushing, like some fall off the end. Like just I had zero capacity for remembering names. By the
All,
time I came back, it was
all
terrible.
you all you had to say was, "My name is Kevin. I'm gonna call you Bruce."
Oh man, my last name. You do not want to know. Like I pronounce it Verdegem. I pronounce it with a French R. If you would say
Okay.
with a rolling R, it'd be Verdegem. English speaking people cannot pronounce that name. I was elder Virgil. I was elder V, Verdi, Verdegem. Like, you think people struggle with Bogomolova? Like, they struggle with they butchered, my name got butchered my entire mission.
Oh, I can
Um,
only imagine.
I do want to give a bit of a shout out to some notable people. Elder Bredlow or
Yeah.
Bretlo, Roman Bretlo. Like amazing guy. Went on exchanges a couple of times with him. Peter Dracocardos. Like
Yeah.
I remember there we had Elder Peterson who was like the tallest guy in our mission, and Elder Dracocardos at some point Present wanted to put them together, and Elder Dracocardos kind of said no because it would detract from the spirit. There would just be this like huge height difference. But I promise you, Elder Dracocardos was a spiritual giant, and to this day find it regrettable that I never got to serve with him except for one exchanges. Like
Yeah.
he was a spiritual giant. He was the kindest man I had ever met at that point. He was the only one. He was the only one who, at his own conference, took the time to pass me a note complimenting me on the things that he recognized in me were, good traits, whereas everybody else, or many of them, had just been pointing out my flaws,
Yeah.
and that really touched me.
That's
He
great.
he truly was amazing. That one time we're on exchanges. Um, I mean, as any man would, I at the time definitely still I'm not impervious to, um, attractive females.
Mhm.
And we were talking with other Dracocardos how we should like, try to focus on the mission and not be distracted by those things. And I only need 2 words with my ADHD to get triggered into a quote or a song or whatever. So I went focus, focus, kind of like Aladdin, like the genie,
Yeah.
you know. And so we had just finished that. We knock on the door, and this stunning, beautiful girl opens the door. And as she goes off to get her dad, Peter and I just turn to each other and go, focus, focus.
Oh my
Sasha
gosh.
remembers. It was Oh, Rayfield, Alex Rayfield.
Oh yeah, Alex.
Yeah, Sasha just remembered the name. British guy, blonde. I remember. Yeah, good guy.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we let's see. We talked to Roman as we're speaking on Sunday, just
Oh,
passed.
that's good. I
So
remember he was so hardworking. I remember he made this he created some tools even on like a floppy disk that he would like, because floppies were still a thing back then.
yeah,
USB hadn't quite settled in all the way.
yeah,
And then he had like made this tool that you could use to be more effective in missionary work. He was an amazing guy.
yeah. He was a lot of fun. I spent 4.5 months around him. We had 4 missionaries in Dunfermline
Hmm.
early on in my mission, and I spent 4.5 months around him. He was awesome. We had a
Have
lot
you
of fun.
have you spoken to Sprague, Caleb Sprague?
Yes, we have. He was one of the earlier episodes. I want to say he was maybe like 6 or 7. If you go
He,
back and look
he
at the
was
archives.
he was our NTC district leader.
Okay.
Um, and he had this weird thing where, for no good reason, he like have this running joke about Trogdor the Burninator from some kind of cartoon or whatever that was popular in the U.S. And he would just randomly be drawing Trogdor the Burninator. I was like, "What's up with this kid, man?" But he was so funny, like this spry little like not a very bulky guy, not at all,
No,
but what a
he wasn't
character.
150 pounds wet.
No, not at all. Um,
But yes, he
Fra-
was a spiritual giant as
yeah.
well, but he knew how to have fun in the midst
Oh
of it
man,
too.
Eller France, and I almost forgot that story. He almost blew us up. Like explosion blew us up. He had taken. Remember, there was like not Poundland. They had like some frozen store that had nothing but freezers.
Oh,
Yeah,
never heard
I
about that.
forget what. Yeah, anyways, it was a chain in Scotland as well, and he had bought some pork chops, and he had taken one out, put it in the skillet or whatever, turned on the gas. It was an actual like gas burning gas stove, and at some point, imagine we're in this like vaulted ceiling, really big kitchen. It's the same kitchen we had the ping pong table
Yeah.
sized table. And I was sitting reading my scriptures on the complete other side. So imagine by the time the gas fills up that entire space for me to smell it. So
Jeez.
he's like, I hear him going, "Man, why is this pork chop still cold?" And then he realizes he didn't turn on the gas,
Oh
and I just went,
no.
"No!" He was about to like kick to turn it on. That would have been in the news. That would have
Oh
blown.
my
Like he
gosh.
nearly blew us up. I was like, "Turn it off. Let's open the windows. Let's get out of here." I was like, "You're about to kill us all."
Oh my
Um,
word.
we slept with the window open there, and apparently our car was in a near miss crash. And we did the math. We were definitely there. We slept through an accident, ambulances outside our open window. We slept through it. It narrowly like missed our car, hit the wall, and then landed in front of our car.
Oh my
And all of this
gosh.
happened while we were sleeping with the window open, and we never heard it. Like,
Wow. I think
I
we've all had experiences like that. I had an instance where I had a companion who was up most of the night fending off people trying to get into our apartment that they thought it was theirs. And the next morning he's like,
drunk.
"What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I was up all night making sure that we were alive and you're in the bed just snoozing." And I was
I
like,
I had a 9 iron next to my bed. We had two double beds with like this much space in between in that bedroom. France snored like crazy. So I'd have a 9 iron that I'd like poked him with to make him turn over. In that in that in that 4-man flat, Leet was sleeping above me. I had to like put my hand in between like the bars and like push up to make him turn on his side or we couldn't sleep. Like, man,
oh man.
had one companion whose feet smelled so bad I had to keep asking him to put his slippers on. It was like he would take them off and I'd smell it from straight across the room. It was like, "You took your slippers off again."
Jeez.
Man.
Oh gosh. So many good memories. Do you have any specific memories of the Vreens that you wanted to share that were memorable, Kevin?
Yes, with Sister Vreens. I don't want to talk too much about President Vreens. He never saw me for who I was, and that's his loss. I never liked his management style. Sister Vreens was different, and I remember um, Elder Anderton and I, who weren't necessarily the most like go getters, but we knew how to teach, and we're in interviews, and we have an interview with Sister Reens as well, and she asks us to teach her, and we beautifully like play off each other and like use scriptures, and she was like, "That is so amazing! Like, you know how few elders are able to do this." And it was so nice to finally have a leader, even though it wasn't a priesthood leader, to recognize the ability to share the gospel message in a mission where that wasn't, I wouldn't say rewarded, but wasn't applauded as much as getting good numbers.
Hmm.
And that to me was a beautiful moment. And obviously her cookies, her birthday cookies. Like
Yeah.
that cookie could be 2 weeks old by the time you got it. You could bash somebody's head in, but it was amazing. This like a cookie the size of your face with M&Ms. Like you could use it as a defensive weapon.
True.
But the love she put into those cookies, that will always stay with me. And of course, Mother Pig.
Yeah.
If you probably never saw that late in the mission, but you may have heard the stories.
Oh no, I saw it.
You
I
saw
I
it?
I think that happened probably right before you went home, like summertime, because she
Oh, it
showed up
happened
and
before, yeah. And then
she sh-
President told her off for it.
yes, and then she was Miss Piggy for the longest time.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, you've mentioned a great group of missionaries, and you do have some great companions that we still have to get in touch with in the future. Is there anyone else that you haven't mentioned that you'd like to hear from in the future as you dive with 2 feet into the podcast, Kevin?
Oof. Some of our old Italian, Elder Dottavio,
Hmm?
Harold Garotta, a
Yeah,
French guy. No. He lives in Canada now, but don't confuse him for Elder Archambault,
yeah.
which he would pronounce Archambault because he was
Archambault.
French Canadian, and it was the funniest thing because me being Belgian, I grew up learning French as a second language before I spoke English, and so when I met Elder Garotta, who was from Nice in France but lives in the U.S. or in Canada right now,
Mhm.
um, I take the opportunity to speak some French. And at some point, the only three French speaking, or at least able to speak French missionaries would come together. And Elder Garota would be like, "Man, you sound so Belgian." I was like, "Gee, I wonder why." But then Elder Archambault would start speaking French, but the Canadian French. Elder Garota and I would look at each other and I was like, how could they mess up French so bad? like, like no issues with him, but oh man. And then Fisher was with Elder Noble that we all called the Nobulator. Remember the
Yeah,
Nobulator? Like
Nobulator.
Noble was this really like short guy who had lived this bubble life where he was so focused on like only studying and preparing for things and never lived. And Fisher ended up serving with him, Matt Fisher, and he was like, I'm gonna get Noble out of his shell. Like I'm gonna make him have fun, you know. Um
Jack
no
and I are talking to Charles next week.
Yeah, Charles
It's,
Noble.
it's gonna
Oh
be fun.
man. Yeah, I wonder what he's up to. Um, who else? Man. Um, Asariado.
He's coming on in June. He's got
Asari AP.
Sorry Ado. Yeah, yep.
Asariado.
Yeah, he's coming on.
I remember it was Elder Fisher's brother sent him a CD with with some um some songs, some of them from like the Shrek movie, and some like near on my god to thee, like this, and they called it like Asariado had started like burning illegal copies in the mission home and like handing them out. And it was like the Asariado CD had done the rounds. I had so
Wow.
many cassettes of elders, musically gifted elders, and sisters who had dubbed songs with lyrics, almost Weird Al Yankovic style, but less funny sometimes, like taking lyrics and or taking songs and then changing them to Mission Life.
Oh yeah.
And that was a great memory, and I feel so sad that I wasn't able to digitize them before they went bad.
This is a funny story. So I got my old iPod out from after my mission about a month ago, and I just put it on shuffle as I'm driving down the road in my truck, and all of a sudden one of those songs comes on, and I was like, I forgot I put them on the iPod, so I'm gonna have to pull them off,
Oh
and then
man,
I'm gonna put them on our YouTube channel for everybody to listen to. So
there's some great ones out there.
they really
Oh
are.
man,
I think the
man.
one that came on was the one about where do bad sisters go when they die? They
They
go
go
down to
down the
be.
beach where they don't baptize. I remember that one. Um, Man, yeah,
So
that
funny.
was the very first one that came to mind. Sasha's also mentioning Zachary Brown. Um,
Yeah, we've been in
Zach
touch with
Brown.
him.
He
He's
he drowned my camera at Zone Conference.
he did?
Like, yeah, like he like wanted to kind of hide my camera, and for some reason, like by the sink, there was this like wall thing, but was like a open water tank at the top. So he was trying to like, I was in the
Set it on
restroom
top of it?
and he wanted to set it on top and it just fell into a tank of water. I
Oh
was without
no.
a camera. And so he was like, no, you can use my camera in the meantime. And I'll come over. I'll try to fix your camera. Eventually it did spring back to life, but by then it was like 4 months had passed and like a
Oh wow.
big chunk of my mission I wasn't able to photograph, and I had to make
Jeez.
do with his far crappier camera. Um,
Jeez.
and it was this whole thing of like, oh, I'll try to restore your camera, and like if it doesn't work, you can have mine, but if it does end up working again, like I would like to be paid for it, and I ended up not paying him for it, and to this
Jeez.
day, I still feel kind of bad about that of not paying for. But then again, I was like, I missed out on so many memories I would have been able to photograph if it wouldn't be for your shenanigans. Um,
Gee,
but yeah,
crazy.
funny guy. But yeah,
Yeah.
Charles Cook, if you could get him on.
He's
Um,
one we've talked to, and again, I think we had him scheduled, and then he had a conflict that came up. But we'll get back in touch with him. He was willing to come on, so we'll get in touch with him in the future.
I honestly don't know. Like, did I mention anyone you hadn't heard about yet? Like, or that you haven't spoken to yet? Well, yeah, obviously
Oh,
that you've
there's
spoken to, but yeah,
there's people I haven't spoken to, and then obviously some of the older
Bragg, we mentioned Bragg
missionaries
already.
that I didn't know. Maybe Jack is familiar with some of them, like Elder Hare and Elder Cooper. Like
Oh
those
man,
are kind of.
Ella Harold, Lehigh Hair. He looks like Bryce Howard. No, not Bryce Howard. Dang, her dad. The Happy Days guy, the movie director. Not Bryce Howard. Ron
Oh, Ron,
Howard.
Ron Howard, really?
Ron Howard. He looks like them. Sasha's also mentioning Adam Rollo.
Yeah, we've reached out to Adam. I haven't been able to get in touch with him, but
Yeah.
he's definitely one we'd love to have on.
And Alec Gilmore.
Alex been on.
He's been on.
Yeah,
Oh man,
we did talk to him a few months ago. It was great to talk with him.
they ended up teaching like Karish's dentist because Karish had like a dental issue or something. Yeah, that's Elder Green that I heard with. Can you stop? You can send it to Zach yourself. Um, where was I? And they went fishing, and like Karish was able to catch like a nice fish or whatever. But Gilmore didn't catch anything. I was like, dude, you're a disgrace to your tribe, man. I was like, what kind of Native American doesn't know how to catch a fish?
Jeez,
I don't know if he took that in good jest, but
I'm sure he did.
I remember we had another White as
Simon.
well. Simon White. No, not
Yeah.
Simon. Well, we had Simon. Didn't we have two other Whites?
I don't know. I know Simon White served with Seriado. It was
Yeah.
so funny.
I think White. I think he was either AP or mission elder at some point, and we had to go somewhere in that ratty old van that we all got picked up from the airport with, and this thing like it wouldn't turn off anymore. So like they could turn it on, they couldn't turn it off. Like you could take the key out of the ignition, the thing. So
Oh,
they had to
no.
like stall it every single time. So they had to like pull on the handbrake and like push the brake and then just like lift up the clutch to just stall the thing
Oh
every
my
single time.
gosh.
It was this old white Ford Transit van, I think. Man,
They must have gotten a new one by the time I got into the
I
mission, because
think
I do
so.
not remember that. That's
Do you
crazy.
remember the Vauxhall Omega president had that we all called Air Force One?
Oh yeah,
Because I was
absolutely.
presidents, right? We all had these like crazy. I burned the clutch on ours so bad. I was learning how to drive. I had passed my theory. I had like my provisional license, and I got transferred before I could take the practical. So
No.
when I got home, we didn't have money to pay for driving school, so I had to like learn how to drive, even though I already could, with my parents for 9 months before I could get my license and drive on my own.
Oh my gosh.
But I had practiced in Inverness where we had our car, and I would go. If had you ever been to the church building in Inverness?
Yeah,
Do you
on the
remember that
there on the river.
windy drive with like the
Y-
parking lot up on the hill? Like I
Yeah.
would drive down to the fence and then reverse it up the slope, stop mid slope, and then take off again to practice rolling hill starts, even in
Wow.
reverse. But I burned the heck out of that clutch, nearly ran over the lamppost. Like my companion's like, dude, didn't you see the lamppost? I missed it by like a hair.
Oh
Like,
my
oh
gosh.
man.
It's good times. Great
Baptized there in
memories.
ice cold water. Like we couldn't get the boiler going, and I baptized this really short guy, so we didn't put much water in. And you know how when you're a man and you enter really cold water, there's that level where the water reaches low hanging fruit. That
Yeah.
is an awkward, painful moment. So the water came. The water was just barely not reaching that level, but when I put him under, like it did reach. So that was like a bittersweet moment, like baptizing my investigator, but at the meantime getting a real shock to my system in this frigid water.
Oh
Man,
goodness.
yeah, good time. I'm glad we're able to keep it mostly positive.
One more.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Crookston
Crookston,
and
Melissa Crookston
Brownlow.
married Brownlow. So those were the other two that ended up getting married.
No, she married Jared Bradley.
Oh, Bradley, yeah, Bradley.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in touch with her, and she's working on some things, so we'll get her on in the future. I
Oh, that's
haven't
good.
talked to Jared though, and so in any case, we can talk
Oh man.
offline more about that.
So many people, but yeah, Amy Webb, you should get her on.
Yeah, I'd
You
love
know,
to.
she was a great lady, still is.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean that's just it. Like we've only been doing this now for 8-9 months now, and we've barely scratched the surface.
oh, it's insane the amount of stories.
There's so many amazing people that we want to touch base with and see what
Par-
they're up to. And
Parmenter and I went to England um, while we were on our mission, sanctioned because the town right across the border there was a media referral there, and that person couldn't get to Newcastle, which was a huge
really,
distance. That was the nearest church in the north of England. The lady
yeah.
couldn't get there, and the elders couldn't get up there. But for us, it was just across the border. So
Oh
we
wow,
had sanctioned, left the mission to go teach.
that's amazing.
We went to the Isle of Skye with the zone leaders on like media miles that we had saved together. Like you remember, like you'd have a bunch of referrals, but if you would end up teaching there, like you wouldn't actually be able to go, so you had to wait if it was far out until you could collect some, and then you'd
Right,
go out there in the hope of being able to teach some of them repeatedly.
right.
Oh man,
Yeah, so many good memories. I don't know. I just love the reminiscing and being able to talk about your own unique experience. And then for myself, and Jack will listen to these obviously, but tying everything together and how, we all lived very island type lives at that point in time because it was just us and our companion, but there were so many other things happening in the mission. And so for us to kind of marry them all together has been quite a cool experience as we've been doing this.
it's halfway through your mission that you know the most other missionaries. Like when you
Mhm.
come out, you barely know anyone. By the time you're halfway, you know everyone, and then by the time you're leaving, you barely know anyone again
It's true.
because you
It's
live
very true.
in that smaller area, and you see like a zone conference, and you hear somebody testifying, "Oh, Elder so and so said this amazing thing," and I'm like, "Who's that?
Yeah.
I've never heard of this kid.
It's true, and it doesn't slow down, right, you know, even
Who's that weird Zach Hewlett?" You know, just
That's right. Yeah.
oh yeah, it was that punk that told me I was from Germany.
Yes. Clearly, that is sunk in deeply, Kevin.
Oh,
Thank you.
it has now. Yes. Thanks for bringing it up. Oh
Well,
man,
I just wanna say
good
thank you
times.
again for taking the time to come on. We truly love you and Sasha, and it's been so great to reconnect with you both. So, just know that we're always thinking of you. We wanna be in touch more, so certainly let us know how we can do that. But, in the meantime, I'm just gonna say cheerio for now, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheerio the new.
All right. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.